Good afternoon. You are tuned in to Fresh Start today. I'm your host, Jermaine Reed, and I have two special guests in the studio with me this afternoon. The lovely Miss Beverly Moore from Safe Haven. How are you doing, Beverly?
I am doing well. A little cold, but I'm okay.
A little cold, but you're okay?
I'm okay.
Great. And then we also have Mr. Scott Carroll from Professional Service Group. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm just a little cold like Beverly. And so we're going to talk this first hour. We're going to be focused on making supervised visitations work, supervised family visitations work. And predominantly we work with a foster care population. And so we're going to talk about the importance of supervised visitation. And hopefully you can call, our listeners can call in at 414-444-5250 to join into the conversation. And then the second half of the show, starting at 4 o'clock, we're going to have Mr. Aaron Pressey in from Sebastian Family Psychology Center. And we're going to talk about children who kill and commit other heinous crimes. And we're going to do an expose on conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder. So we're going to really have an interesting conversation. Want to just say happy holidays to everybody that's listening. And again, if you want to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250. And let me start with, let me just ask. So what is supervised visitation?
Well, Scott, I'll take that. Okay. Supervised visitation is actually a court-ordered service that a provider does for children, whether they are in foster care or whether it's going through a family or children's court.
Okay.
Supervised visitations actually originated over about 25 years ago. There was a case in California where a gentleman and his wife were going through a divorce and a separation, and at which time the father was visiting with his children. And in the time of the children being turned back to the mother, the father decided to kill the children, and he also killed his wife, to be soon ex-wife, and I believe killed himself. And so at that time, that's when the judicial system in California decided to start with something called court ordering supervised visitations, hence also safe exchange services.
Oh, wow. So that's some good information that you shared. Why you just, I don't know. You want to add something to that, Scott? I don't know.
Well,
Well, see, I kind of had to, for school, my thesis was actually around therapeutic supervised visitations. And so therefore, when I really started researching the need of it, whenever there's always a problem, you have to go back to the beginning and where did this come from and where did this arise? And so that's really what really sparked my interest. And so there we have it.
Okay, so now with supervised visitation has been around for about 25 years, and let me ask you, you mentioned in your response, Beverly, that you also receive your referrals from family court and from child welfare, and where's the other?
And children's court.
And from children's court. Is
Correct.
that the same with you?
yeah, most of our referrals come from the Bureau.
From the Bureau of Child Welfare?
Yes.
Okay.
And we also do family court cases as well, which we refer to as private pay.
Yes.
Okay, so how long have each of your programs served the Milwaukee community? Or are you just serving Milwaukee community? Are you serving other communities?
Yeah, well, Safe Haven is all over the state of Wisconsin. We've even had clients even down in Chicago. But we definitely do service as well, like our family court, children's court, and the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare.
Okay.
Okay, Professional Services Group has been servicing the community since around 2003. We have visitation programs in, of course, Milwaukee, which we pretty much service the whole state because we have workers going pretty much everywhere. Mm-hmm. We also had a smaller program until recently in Racine.
Okay.
And also we have one out in Oshkosh.
Okay. So approximately how many families do you all serve on an annual basis, your programs?
Well, last year, Safe Haven serviced over 25 families,
Okay.
and that was through the child welfare systems. And then as far as our private or our private pay, our clients that come through family or children's court, we serviced about 4 families for the fiscal year.
Okay.
Well, year to date, we've provided about 9,300 visits. And servicing
9,300, yeah.
9,300, yeah. And we also service about 300 clients, so that's 2 to 3 visits per week per family.
And where do you all provide those visits at?
Oh, well, we have our location on 1126 South 70th Street.
So in the home
West Dallas,
and in
then
the
we do
community?
in-home in the
In
community.
home and in the community.
Yeah,
and
as
what
well as
about Safe Haven?
The same for Safe Haven. We're located also in West Dallas, 7441 West Greenfield Avenue. And so we do have two locations, two suites that are in that building. And then we, of course, also provide services in the families' homes or the home. It could also be of the caregiver or the parent's home. We also do services in the community
Okay.
as well.
So now, I don't know this, and maybe perhaps one of you can answer this question, but in the state of Wisconsin, is there any type of certification or standards around what supervised visitation should look like?
I don't think there is a specific standard.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they want, basically it's all geared around the safety of the child. So
Okay.
that's the main goal of our program, is to maintain the safety of the child, make sure that the parent is basically being above board when doing the visitation. If we feel unsafe or we feel the child is unsafe, we will end the visits.
So now, with that being said, you said there's no certification program that is promoted by the state of Wisconsin or standards that they have, but each of you probably have some standards that's related to the program or the services that you all offer. And so can we talk a little bit about
Well, actually, nationally speaking, we have something that's called the Supervised Visitation Network. That's correct. It's called SVN, the acronym for short. And as of 2013, prior to 2013, there was not an established visitation agency that in Wisconsin that was participating in the visitation network. So that is something that I'm excited to see, because that's available to us now, whereas prior to, as Scott was saying, it was not available.
So basically, you can have a lot of programs because you only represent two. You all today represent only two programs, but there's probably a number of programs, about 45?
About 4 or 5.
About 4 or 5 programs that contract to provide supervised visitation. And I guess the question that I have is because there was no standards around it, so each of these programs could basically be doing whatever they feel is appropriate in terms of managing and service delivery.
Right. That is correct. I think a visitation agency really should have a program that closely adopts itself with the Department of Children and Families, Chapter 59. I'm sorry, Chapter 56, actually, because that chapter really outlines a lot of requirements, not just for visitation agencies, but for those that provide foster care.
Okay.
And so my background is in law enforcement. Being a law enforcement officer, a past law enforcement officer here in Wisconsin, I was able to receive a lot of training on proper documentation, training on first responders, training on the signs of abuse and so forth. And those things have been very helpful in what we do at Safe Haven and our training program and so forth.
So now, Scott, you had mentioned that typically the goal of supervised visitation is to monitor for safety. Because typically when there is supervised visitation, the safety somehow comes into question.
That's correct.
Okay. So you monitor for safety. What does a supervised visitation session look like at PSG?
Okay, on site?
Yeah, on site let's do on site. Then Beverly, you'll take that and do in the home setting.
Sure.
Okay. So basically, what it looks like is you have in the room, you have tables, you have chairs, you have toys, you have books, everything that basically are the shared needed.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We expect and hope that the parents do is basically come in, make sure it's a nurturing environment from their standpoint. If bring in lunch, bring in other things that they may have at the home that the children have to make sure that they feel comfortable. Do everything to make the children feel comfortable.
Okay.
Basically, we provide, kitchen services if they need to come in and warm food up. If they need to refrigerate things ahead of time, if you get there early, you have stuff you need to be refrigerated, we'll have that on site.
Okay.
A lunchroom area for them to basically sit down and eat as a family, and then basically provide the learning, like books for young kids. We want the parents to basically be able to do stuff that they would not naturally do at home, like help kids with the homework if they're school aged.
Okay.
Basically make sure that the diapers are changed for the babies. We have diaper changing stations on site. And then basically just interact. And we want to basically make sure that the parents you have kids of all levels.
Okay.
So if you need to get on the floor with the kids, get down on the floor, play with the kids, play with the toys. If you need to be at the table helping them with their homework, do that. If you need to, basically, if you need to make sure the kid's going back and forth to the bathroom, you're being shadowed, more or less, not shadowed, but supervised in that whole scenario.
Okay.
Basically, it's for the parent supervision and safety, and also for the child.
What does a in-home supervised visit look like?
Well, before we start our in-home visits, we like to do an intake process where we are able to go out and actually see the home. We do know that our bureau workers and sometimes guardian ad litem's are able to do that, but in some cases, the guardian ad litem's may not be able to, and so therefore Safe Haven is that first line of contact to say, I think this is safe or this may not be safe. So we'd like to make sure that the home is safe, that it's child-proofed for the child or children that will be visiting. And typically, it allows the family to really be in a very natural environment where the children are able to interact more comfortably with their parent or parents. The children have the opportunity to do things that they have not had the opportunity to do in a while. So I am a very big advocate of home visitations, just because it really allows not just that for the child, but then our parents. See, when you have a parent that's in the office doing visits, and we do office visits, definitely we do, they are a little different. They're out of their comfort zone. They're out of their
Do you see that too?
element.
Yes.
You see that? Okay. They're
Yeah,
out of their
Scott and I
element, yeah.
both see it. They're out of that comfort zone, and so they some of their movements, some of the things that they say and do are kind of rehearsed, and in a sense, I feel coerced. So when they're in their natural environment, you get to see a different side of them, and not just them, but the child also. And that's how I'm sometimes
So
able to
children can
engage.
pick up, when they're in different settings and they respond to their environment, they adapt
Exactly.
to those environments.
Well, see, here's the thing. Anytime a child is taken or removed in foster care, or the child is looked at in a private, paid situation where they're going through children's court or family court, there's 3 protective capacities that are involved.
Okay.
There's the behavioral, emotional, and the mental capacity. And these are the 3 things that we look for when we're doing visits, to see how are parents effectively engaging with their children, how it is that they are able to interact, and how can they handle if a situation should arise, especially if we're looking to move towards partial
Reunification.
unsupervised
Okay,
visits,
yeah.
unsupervised visits, reunification. Does this parent have the protective capacities? So that we don't, and what that does is it helps alleviate the possibility of a reentry back into the foster care program.
Okay. Anything you want to say, Scott?
Oh no, she's saying she's
She
pretty
said-
much
she
she's
said-
pretty much taking everything that and
Scott's
no,
been
no,
doing
but
this
that's-
for a while, so
yeah.
we know.
It's basically that, and like especially with home visits, we don't go out and do the assessment. We don't do a home visit unless the case manager has done the
That's
assessment
correct.
for us.
Okay.
So when they do that and they are ready to approve the home visit,
That's correct.
we'll start moving the visits to the home.
Are there any innovative approaches that you all take to offer quality supervised visitations? Is there anything that you all do? Because granted, I think every agency has a niche, or they have something they offer, and it doesn't mean that you're better than the next agency, but it's just what we do, and we do this well. So what is it that PSG does well when it comes to supervised visitations?
I think what we do well is we try to engage and interact with the child, make sure that the children are safe, and make sure the parent is comfortable with our workers. I mean, being that we have a program that's set with more of part-time workers, every one of our workers are part-time, so we don't have any full-time workers, so a lot of them have full-time jobs. We try to, so that means, most of our stuff availability-wise is in the late afternoon.
Okay.
We have some people who do a lot of the daytime visits, but most of our workers are available in the afternoon. And we try to make sure to put permanent workers on visits as much as possible. Schedules change, school schedules, things of that nature, but we try to keep as much comfort as we can with the workers and as much comfort with calling the office to verify things as we can. So I think communication is probably good.
Communication. What is that Safe Haven does?
Well, one of the things that we do at Safe Haven, let's just say hypothetically speaking, I have not seen my father for 6 years. Now all of a sudden I'm expected to sit in an office or go to his home and visit. What would that feel like for me? So we encourage what's called a phone visit, which allows for the child to ask questions. They can do that, or they can do it through a letter. This is a safe way for a child to feel comfortable visiting with with their mother or their father. And then the second thing we do is I like to build in little passwords with my children, especially my verbal children.
Okay,
So
okay.
I may say, hey, I tell you what, Scott, you know, you're going to see your mom. It's been a while. I tell you what, if something that he says or does makes you feel uncomfortable, you're going to look at me and you're going to say,
Help.
Miss Beverly. And that's their little way to cry help, right?
Right.
Because a child is going to feel uncomfortable about saying in front of their mother or their father, I don't want to be here. So
Okay.
what I would suggest to Scott is I would say, Scott, I tell you what, if your mom or dad, or let's say mom does something makes you feel uncomfortable, you're going to look at me and you're going to say, Miss Beverly, when are we going to go and fly a kite? Mom may not know anything of what we're talking about, but something has happened. Something's going on.
Has that happened
Maybe
before?
oh yeah, parents are sneaky. They'll cut their eye at their children. They'll try to make assumptions or ask questions about, you know, their placement.
Exaggerating.
You know, they
Gotcha.
do. They
Okay.
it's so a child is being re-traumatized, and under my watch with Safe Haven, the child will not be re-traumatized again.
Oh wow.
That's what we do.
Yeah, we do a ton of redirection with
Yes.
the workers, and basically that's just the same. That's just the same as if you're unsafe.
Mhm.
If you feel that the child is unsafe, or you can see the anxiety, we will try to redirect the conversation as much as possible. Then, if you can't, you won't redirect, we'll end the visit.
Because again, the goal of supervised visitation for children is to ensure that it's a conflict-free, stress-free,
That's correct.
hazard-free environment.
That's
Okay,
right.
well, what we're going to do is we're going to go take a break, and after the break, we're going to...
I get to go potty.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to take a bathroom break, and we'll come back. But if you'd like to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250, or you can tweet us at Fresh Start 860, or you can Facebook us at Fresh Start Today 860. All right, we'll be back right after the break. We are back. You're listening to Fresh Start Today on WNOV 860, and we're talking about making supervised family visits count. And we have two organizations from the Milwaukee area that's our guest today. We have Beverly Moore from Safe Haven, and we have Mr. Scott Carroll from Professional Services Group, also known as PSG. And so we're talking about supervised visitation, and Beverly, you kind of talked about the three capacities or protective capacities.
That's
And,
correct.
and can you revisit that for just a second?
Sure. You have the behavioral
Behavioral?
capacity, emotional, as well as mental. So the behavior means, you know, can a parent provide the physical care a child needs? Are they able to pick them up, handle them properly? Can they interact with their child? Emotionally speaking, if I am to talk to a parent and let them know that, you know, your child has had a difficult time, can that parent emotionally calm that child down? Can the parent handle the sometimes stress that comes with walking away from your child after a visit?
Okay.
And then the mental capacity as well. If I tell them and redirect them and say, no, you can't just let her walk across the parking lot like that. We need to hold her hand.
Do you find
understand?
yourself getting into situations where there is tension there between parents' authority, parental authority, and then the authority or the control that the visitation worker or company has? Is there a conflict there sometimes?
Yes,
Go ahead,
'cause,
Scott.
I
wanna hear
say
quick.
yes because a lot of times parents come in and even though they may know, they don't understand what they did wrong to say why the child is removed. So when you come into a situation where you have somebody quote unquote watching you,
Right.
okay, they don't want anyone to redirect them. They don't want anyone to redirect them. They want to be able to do whatever they do in what they've been doing because they don't feel anything was wrong with the parenting session, you know, with their skills.
So do you kind of recap at the end in terms of what could have been done differently or these recommendations that you offer? I mean, how is that managed?
Well, actually, that is a good question. And so that we don't sometimes bump heads during visits, that's why that intake is very important. One of the things you have to look at is you have to look at the racial background of your families because and when I cross train on cultural diversity, I train the staff, you know, to understand because I have staff that may be Caucasian, that may be Black, Hispanic. I need you to understand the different cultures that you're that you're working with, so you understand that when a black woman says, I'm gonna smack you, that's just you getting on my nerves. But that's how they may communicate that. So we're trying to work with our parents to help them, learn how to properly and effectively communicate with our children so that they're not turning around and duplicating the same kind of behavior towards schoolmates, their foster parents, etc. So, but yeah, recapping is definitely important. I like to talk with parents after a visit. I don't try to redirect a parent during a visit because sometimes they feel as though you take away from their place of authority. So
that's important because you don't want to diminish their authority in the eyes of their child, who they will eventually be reunified with, or the goal of reunification.
Yeah. So I like to do that, or I may call. We had a parent, and she just brought a big bag of Flaming Hots to her visit.
For dinner?
And yes, that was dinner. And she had Flaming Hots, and I think those little hug juices or those little whatever. Yeah, so I had to help her understand, we want to not give this to your 1-year-old and mess up his stomach. Let's give him something different. She says, well, my older girls that are 13 and 14, they like it, and this is what we fed them, so that's fine. How about you bring a smaller Ziploc bag for the girls, and then let's find something that is very suitable to feed, the baby. So doing that after a visit or calling them and finding something positive to say is also very helpful, because you have to understand they've been shunned by their family, sometimes by the system, and the last thing that they need is a visitation worker talking down to them about how they're interacting with their children.
So let's talk about parental responsibilities during a visit. What are some of the things, if you had to give, between the two of you, if you all can come up with 5 responsibilities that parents have during the course of supervised visits?
To be nurturing is the best one, I would say.
So how is that? Give me an example.
Show your parenting skills, show that you are nurturing, show that you care. Ask your child how their day went when you see them.
Ask questions about them.
No, be emotionally connected to your child. Attempt that emotional connection. Attempt. Also, pay attention.
Pay attention.
A lot of people, unfortunately, want, because that is their child or children, they want to just be around their children. So them being around their children can be them coming into the room, sitting down, and just knowing that their kids are around, they're fine. But they're not interacting, they're not talking. So we try to keep them engaged, tell them to engage with their child, play games, do something. Just make sure that you're connecting with your child.
That you're connecting with your child. So paying attention to your child, connecting with your child, and then you said to be nurturing, to ask questions. How are you doing today? How was your week? Okay, Beverly, what are some other parental responsibilities?
One of the main ones that I love to employ, and I think it just also comes from me being a mom of 7. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm drinking milk, right? My oldest is in college, would you believe it? But what I like to have my parents do is something called Parents as Teachers. So I try to get the parents engaged in their educational aspects of that child. What is the child doing? Work with them on their homework. Bring some flashcards that are going to be instituted in visits, because sometimes supervised visits can turn into this being a playroom for the children, and the parents are sitting there and kind of looking bored or kind of disinterested at times.
So do those visits count? That's what
yes.
Do those kind of visits count?
See, once again, they do count. See, when a child is placed in foster care, they have about 1.5 years in which to prove that they can provide in these 3 protective capacities or areas of protective capacity: the behavioral, emotional, and mental. So they definitely count, because I know the Bureau would not want to place a child back in a home of a parent that cannot effectively manage and handle their children. So if a parent is not doing a great job, and we're redirecting everything I'm doing at Safe Haven, everything Scott is doing at PSG, if they're not adhering to that, we need to be able to show this. We have to have the right documentation, which is why documentation is so key, because that's what's going to support a caseworker stance or guardian ad litem stance for a child to be reunified, or permanency could also be adoption or guardianship. So we need to be able to see where this parent is, how they're engaging with their child, and make a decision.
And I'm glad you brought it. And I'm going to ask you all for 2 more responsibilities, parental responsibilities, but I'm glad you brought up that homework piece. And I think you also mentioned that, Scott, too, because I hear a lot of foster parents who are frustrated. I've been frustrated where most of these visits take place on school nights.
Yes.
And so most foster children have academic deficits.
Correct.
And when children come into care, a lot of them are already functioning below
Right.
where their grade placement is.
Exactly.
So when these visits happen, if they're happening once or twice a week, that could interrupt
Definitely.
the educational process of those children, because homework time is very critical.
Definitely.
And I think one of the worst things in the world is when kids who have homework, who are functioning below their grade placement, they come back and guess what? The homework is not done.
Oh, yes.
And then the foster parent has to catch the brunt of that, so it's really important, I think, for supervised visitation programs to really carve out that time to say, let's make homework time of
That's
value in this visit.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because it also, and then you know what, sometimes parents are able, I've been able to really encourage some of my parents to add in a benefit or a bonus or some kind of a reward for an educational milestone reached. So let's say that parent is working with that child, and in some cases this is not feasible because some parents are uneducated, and when the children are at middle school levels and high school levels, it's difficult for them to work with them in that area. But we're able to, in most of our cases where it's a primary school age child, we're able to build in some great rewards and say, you know what, let's learn this. When we get to this book, then you know what, maybe we'll email the caseworker and see if they'll okay a community visit, and maybe we can go to Chuck E. Cheese on this one. So it's just building in a good reward system, and then the parent is also feeling that they are also empowering not just themselves but their child as well, and helping their child reach and attain those goals.
Okay, from an educational standpoint, say you have a child who is a single child or a parent who has only one child, and the child is not performing well in school. Can you all do supervised visits at libraries or other places?
Yes.
Definitely.
You can? Okay.
We
great.
encourage a lot of the visitations that happen in the community. We encourage libraries above a Chuck E. Cheese or above going to the museum and things like that, because the thing is that gives you time to basically put them down, to have them read, to have them study, to both of you get involved in basically helping the library to have business, and also helping your child know where the library is, what's in there, what they can provide.
All right. Give me two more parental capacities.
I would say
Not capacities, but responsibilities.
that's
Yeah.
great. I think I did touch on that earlier, and I can't remember, Scott, if you did. I'm sorry, but nurtured, not just the nurturing component, but making sure that the parents are really helping their children with any behavioral issues. One of the things that my foster parents, and I know I'm kind of touching a little bit into the next area, but one of the things that our foster parents complain on, maybe how the children respond to them. So when a parent can behaviorally connect with their child and say, listen, I'm kind of hearing that you're acting like this with so-and-so, you're acting like that with so-and-so. When you feel like that, can you call me? Or when you feel like that, what are some things, let's go over some things that we can do here during a visit, so that the next time you don't get your way, I know there's 2 other kids that are there in foster care, but you know what, maybe we can implement this particular means for you to communicate effectively. So working on those behavioral areas, it definitely is effective.
Okay. So what about transportation? Is that their responsibility? Food?
We provide.
Yes,
We provide
You provide transportation? Okay.
Right.
You provide transportation.
Well, right. But, we don't, I think he's talking about for the parents. So the
Okay.
parents
Oh,
have to.
for the parents. For the parents, that's their responsibility.
Yeah.
They need to
That is
provide their
theirs.
own
Right.
transportation.
And
okay.
there are a few cases where we do provide transportation, but
Okay.
it's typically approved by the caseworker.
Okay.
We have a visit that is pretty far up. We do a visit we've done visits up in Pepin, Wisconsin. Now that's 4.5 hours away. What parent? I don't know a bus that goes that far.
Well, who's up
I
in
can't
Pepin,
even
Wisconsin?
Well, you know what? Actually, yeah, there's a foster home there,
Well, I guess
and it's
they're
a
a little
special,
safer home.
very, very, very critical child that has special needs, and the best placement, honestly, is there, and they're doing a wonderful job.
great.
And so I commend the caseworker that made that decision, but it's a 4.5 hour drive
there.
just to Pepin to do a 2-hour visit.
Okay.
So in that case, right, but normally our parents are responsible for showing up. I ask the parents to do some things that I think is very effective. I may ask them to limit it to 1 piece of candy a visit. They're going to just
I
bring
think
it.
foster parents are asking the same thing.
Right.
Please.
Because you get the kids bouncing off the walls and you're like, what just happened at this visit? So that helps. And we like to use that at the end of the visit
Okay.
as a nice reward system. But if not, just making sure the parents are bringing healthy, well-balanced meals. to the best of their ability. I know they can't do it, so I may make suggestions. I may say, hey, why don't you maybe just see if you can make a sandwich or something. We have a refrigerator and a microwave at Safe Haven, so when we know what our next caseload looks like, I may say, hey, well, you're right in here again tomorrow, so it's okay if you bring something, you need to freeze it, and we can microwave a meal. So those are some of the things that is helpful.
And too, I think with that food piece, because I think to make supervised visitations work, that everybody has to play a role. And so there's definitely foster parent responsibilities, and we're going to touch on that a little bit. But when you talk about the food piece, because sometimes people don't have the money, they don't have the resources, like you said,
That's
to
correct.
provide a well-balanced meal. And sometimes I'm sure there's times when parents walk through the door and they don't have any food for the children. In those instances, is food provided? Is it apples, oranges? And for the foster parent side is, some people say, okay, well, I'm done cooking, So maybe perhaps just putting something aside just because Johnny may come home and be
Correct.
hungry.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, we've had on a couple occasions where we have had to provide food, especially on our sibling visits. Now, that's something that is not touched a lot because there is not a parent around. Maybe the mom is incarcerated or dad. So we still have these displaced children that are maybe scattered about, and they still want to be able to visit.
At penitentiaries or?
Yes, we have definitely done visits there before.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
but yes, we definitely have. So that's a time when we do that. Typically, I always give the staff, my staff have a expense account that we use, and they'll use that account to take care of things like that.
So for the fifth parental responsibility, I'm going to see if you all will agree on this. What about calling ahead? You want to finish it?
Yes.
What?
Yes, when you especially have parents that have, because in this population at times they can be not as responsible
Committed.
as you would like. Exactly. Scott said it perfectly well, not committed. Go ahead, Scott.
No. Well, yeah, we have a large population of not committed parents. We try to keep as much communication with the caregivers as possible. Caregivers, foster parents, kinship care parents, whichever one we deal with. We try to keep the communication lines open so that we can let them know, hey, got a call from mom or haven't received a call from mom. A lot of our visits have stipulations where they have to call in by a certain time or the visit is canceled.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this question, because you all are using the term not committed. Is it not committed, or could it possibly be that there are so many conditions that the parent has to meet with 24 hours in a day, and a lot of these services are in variety of places, limited transportation, and now it's 5 o'clock, and I'm tired, and I gotta get here. And it doesn't take away from the importance of the supervised visit, because those are critically important to reunification.
Correct.
Right. So I was just trying to look at that. Is sometimes the dynamic is not just so much I'm not committed.
Yeah, no, I say non-committed because I know that people have stuff to do. I understand that, I really do. But if this is the life of your child, this is bringing your family back together. I understand you may have classes, things of that nature, but the thing is, if a phone call at 10 o'clock is too much for you to make, I don't know.
I got you.
And
Right.
That's
finding ways.
That's what I mean. Find a way. If you don't have a phone,
Because when you don't show up,
yeah.
Oh,
that's
yes.
the way it looks. It
And
looks
you
like
said
you're
to the
not
child.
committed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a case where the brother and sister had not seen their mother in months. I want to say it was close to a year. The very first visit, I got the children together. We got them up to the office, and they were excited. And I had to tell these children and look them in the face and say, I'm going to have to take you all home because your mom isn't coming. And to see the children saddened, that really saddened my heart. So we, for that particular parent, did institute or implement that, that procedure where we need to hear from you before the children are out of school. So I typically like to say by 1 o'clock p.m., we need to hear from you to confirm the visit. And then that's at which time we like to make sure the staff remember to call the foster parents so the foster parents can make the appropriate decisions to get the children picked up from school.
because these no-shows, the disappointment
Yes.
that comes with the impact of that no-show on children emotionally. And I know there's been times when children have come back to my care from a no-show visit, and you have to try to get them stable, and they act out, and the teachers catch it the next day. So to parents, we really stress that whatever needs to happen to get to those visits, it is really important for you to do that for your children.
Right.
For your children.
And here's one thing that, and I won't necessarily say I don't like it that the Bureau does, but I understand why they do it. But there's a 15-minute grace period that's given to parents. There, something that really is difficult at times. There are times when I have to leave with a child in our contract. After 15 minutes, if the parent is not there, you have to leave regardless. So there's nothing worse than walking out and getting ready to strap children in, and the parent shows up like, let me just visit. And I have to tell them.
Is that traumatic right there?
That is problematic, actually.
So maybe there is a way to possibly engage a conversation, because that's got to be difficult.
Right.
Because now this child is in a car with you, and do they kind of see you all as the enemy, or you're not allowing me to see my parent, and then you drop them off at the doorstep to me, and it's like, is this because she showed up 16 minutes late and oh wow.
And per our contract, we have to leave. We don't have that choice.
You have to leave.
Now,
do we understand why though? Do anybody know? I would love to hear somebody from the Bureau call in and why is that clause?
I will tell you somewhat why it's important.
Okay.
If I'm a mother and I have 2 kids and they've been removed from me in foster care, I have to be able to show that I can be where I need to be on time. If I'm picking up my children from daycare and the daycare closes at 6 o'clock, I need to be able to show that I can be where I need to be on time, and I can make the necessary adjustments.
Well,
we know things
take
happen.
Because I run late at least 10 minutes to everything I do.
I just build in my budget aftercare expenses.
Exactly. There's some provisions,
Right.
but okay. So I get it. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. And again, if you'd like to join this conversation, you can call 414-444-5250. We're talking about making supervised visits count. Let's take this call. Sorry, I know we've missed a couple calls. Can we?
Hello?
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher, and I was calling. I've been listening to this lady and this gentleman describe how basically they are agents of the state and how they go in and remove people's children. I don't know if they're parents themselves.
No, they didn't say, let me correct, they didn't say about removing kids.
Or they are.
The kids are already removed.
Who negotiate access to people's children who have been taken out of their homes.
Okay.
That is who they represent. They are agents of the state, and they are like tentacles of an octopus whose head sits in Madison. And they send these black people to give them jobs, and they think that they're actually doing something that is a great thing, notwithstanding people who do make mistakes.
True.
Regarding their children and how they may not have the ability, lacking the knowledge to appropriately care. But who the hell are you and this other person to say that you are the saviors for some people's children where you don't know how you're going to make sure that these children's future are secure?
Okay, Chris, can I ask you something? We're going to allow them to respond, okay? And then we have another caller, but there's a question I'm going to ask you when this is done, okay? Can you hold on one second, Chris?
Ask me a question.
All right.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for calling in.
My name is not Chris. My name is Christopher.
I'm sorry, Christopher.
Well, thank you so much, Christopher, for calling in with your concerns. Where our role comes in at is when a child has actually been abused in foster care, or when there are substantiated charges where a child has been removed or it's not safe for them to visit. What we actually do is we provide the opportunity for parents to get back in the place where they were before. One of the things that's very unique about Safe Haven is we actually wrap services around the parents. So we don't just do supervised visits, but some of our parents just don't know. Maybe they weren't taught the right way in which to parent. And so we provide the parenting assistance. We also provide parenting classes. Some court orders state that parents have to have jobs. So Safe Haven actually provides what's called community support. And this allows our parents to become employable so that we can help them find jobs, just to diminish any opportunity for a judge to say you can't have your son or your daughter back. So that's actually what our role is, and we enjoyed what we do.
Well,
it sounds as though you enjoyed it a whole lot.
Mr. Chris,
the question you were going to ask me. Yes, sir.
Chris, let me ask you, do you know of anyone who parenting is compromised in terms of they're not doing the best job or a great job at providing for their children, whether emotionally, physically, financially? I mean, do you know of anyone?
There is no one.
Not perfect.
No,
I'm not talking
particularly.
About perfect. Yeah.
But to generalize this, when it comes to the black community,
yes,
overwhelmingly, a lot of people are in dire straits. So they are
That's
absolutely
correct.
met with difficulty. And
Exactly.
sure, there are certain people who may not meet what your definition of a good parent is. You
Well,
should
right, but I
probably
mean,
look at
clearly,
that
what?
definition when it comes to your own children.
Right, true.
Correct.
But we're not just talking about that, but we're talking about where children are being physically abused, they're being unsupervised, they're 2 and 3 years of age, and you have a 6-year-old watching them. And you're right, there's a lot of folk in our community who are in dire
Well,
straits.
may I say one more thing?
Sure.
What I'm getting from them is that, especially this young lady, this woman in particular, she's laughing, and it sounds as though she's happy. You should think about what type of. I understand everybody has to work, and we need to have bread and butter, and we have to have subsistence. But I think we should look at who and what we are working for, and we probably should question our own personal ethics and what it is that propels us or compels us to do whatever it is that makes us so happy, like this lady seems to be
Right.
when it comes to being a gate between people and their children.
So gatekeepers, yeah. Well, you know what, Christopher, I do appreciate you calling, but we got to
Thank
get to the next call. You've made a very valuable point. I do think that, the job that a lot of us do in child welfare is a hard job, and there's some hard decisions that have to be made, and we don't always have it right. But that's why we need people like you, Christopher, to give us a call, to connect with us, give us some insight, let us know what we're doing wrong and how we can improve what we're
Yeah,
doing. So
exactly.
I do appreciate you calling, and I hope you continue to listen to the show and tell other people about the show. And okay? Hello, you're listening to Fresh Start Today. How can I help you?
Hi, I've been listening to your program, and I do think it's a very good thing that you guys are doing as far as having this safe haven. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the other business. And with respect to Christopher and what you were hearing from him was a righteous anger is what I would say.
Okay.
And that I believe that, child rearing is such a subjective thing. What you may think is good, another person may not.
Right.
What one person may do in their home may be considered child abuse, and another person may not consider it child abuse.
Correct.
And so what you may or may not see is what's going on with respect to Christopher and that anger that you're hearing from him. I've had the experience where I've seen someone who had their young child taken from him. He was about, 7 or 8, for spanking. And in my family, the way we did it, that was perfectly fine.
Right.
His child was taken from him. So it's a very subjective thing, and I think that's what you were hearing from Christopher, and I just think that should be recognized.
And I acknowledge that, and rightfully so. I think there are a number of folk in our community who need to be angry. Because again, we don't always get it right, and it does not make us better when we have removed folk from their home because we said they didn't do it right, but then
That's
when
correct.
you place them in our custody, our care, or with our programs, and then we drop the ball or we don't hit the target.
No. I don't want it to be a function of whether you consider something to be right or wrong, but just recognizing the subjective nature of what we're discussing here.
Yes.
And
In and of itself, it's subjective. What I think is good for my child, you may not feel is good for my child.
Correct.
And just recognizing that, and I think, I don't know her name, I apologize.
Beverly?
But I think Beverly alluded to that when she said that she does cross-cultural training of her staff so that, you recognize that in a Korean family, such and such behavior may be perfectly fine, whereas
Correct.
in a European-American family, that is not okay.
All right.
So I just think that needs to be brought out and recognizing where Christopher was coming from.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you
Thank
very
you for
much,
your
and
call.
thank you for what you all are doing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Enjoy your holiday. Caller, you're on air with Fresh Start Today.
Yes. The gentleman 2 calls ago, I think his name was Chris.
Christopher.
And
Christopher.
Yes, I absolutely agreed with him 100%.
Yes.
And the young lady that followed him and I couldn't hear the rest because I cut my radio down, but I believe as well, there is a sense, I'm just listening as a parent and as someone that had to help raise my brothers, and now I'm in a professional career and I help my brothers come along. Thank the Lord they didn't get caught up in the system, but to have that young lady be so flippant and as if this is just, she's being very disrespectful in her tone. This is a very serious issue you guys are talking about.
Right.
And she's not showing the right. I'm not telling her how to sound, but she's talking to a community where a large number of our children are in this system.
That's
correct.
right.
And young lady, I'm not trying to. I thank you for your service because I'm a public
Thank you.
servant too. But you got to watch that tone of, well, if the parent isn't there in 15 minutes, as a law enforcement officer, and I have to use a lot of discretion. And if someone arrives on the scene or someone has proof or shows me, hey, I got my insurance, I don't have my card with me, I have it on my cell phone, I'm gonna look at that and I'll take that.
That's
and you're
correct.
saying that this is paperwork. 15 minutes, that's it.
No,
There could be bus issues. We're dealing with our community where we have people that are so heavily dependent on external factors that we can't just use a blanket rule. And if you, as I assume, African American woman, that have a little bit of discretion, that could help someone that you see making a significant effort, I would hope you will break your neck to go out the way to ensure that family gets back together versus our children being adopted up into Rice Lake and here and there and not having a clue of where they're connected to maybe 10, 15 years from now. So I guess I'm in agreement with Chris that he had a righteous indignation with your tone and you guys coming off as if this is some like, oh, well, we got to do our job. No, this is families, our communities. And if we got to do whatever we have to do to make sure we hold them together, and you as a public servant can do whatever you can do to help and maybe advocate to your supervisors, let's do this to help this family stay together. I would hope you do that versus being flippant about it. So I thank you guys for listening to me.
Thank
but
you.
I just was really turned off by your tone. So
You know,
it was heartbreaking, actually.
Okay. Thank you for calling. I appreciate your contribution, the things that you said. You said a lot of valuable things, and you're exactly right. These are a lot of our families that's in the system, and it's going to take all of us to do some advocacy and some support, and do what's in their best interest. And I know sometimes that's difficult, but then we have that moral responsibility to make sure that we are connecting. And having worked with Beverly and her program, I know that she really is passionate about the children and families, and not just children, but the birth parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for calling. Next caller.
I just want to let you know that I agree with that caller, 100% and a half, and then a half. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for calling. So we're going to take a break, and we do appreciate all of you all calling. If you want to, we're going to have to wrap this session up, and the next session is going to be talking about children that kill and commit other heinous crimes, and we're going to do an expose on conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder. So we're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back. The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ngera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children. You are listening to Fresh Start Today. I'm your host, Jermaine, and I have in the studio with me Beverly Moore from Safe Haven and Mr. Scott Carroll from Professional Service Group. And we have to transition out of this segment in order to get to our next topic, but definitely want to give each of our guests an opportunity to make closing statements. So, hey, there you go, Scott.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for coming on, allowing me to come on today. And just to talk a little bit about, supervised visitation and what it means to me and to our company and everything like that. We are always looking to basically, like I said, the main thing is we want to make sure that children are safe, make sure that we can maintain that bond between the parent and the child, and also make sure that we help them with the parenting skills that may be needed or may be requested per the Bureau. We are always looking for new exciting people to come join. So if you're interested in being a supervised visitation worker, feel free to give us a call at 414-727-2789. Once again, that's Professional Services Group, or PSG. 414-727-2789.
Okay.
And thank you so very much again, Jermaine, for having us and being on the Fresh Start Today program. And first of all, I just definitely want to apologize if there's anything that I said or did to offend anyone. That was definitely not my desire or my intentions. What I do want to make sure that we are very clear that the requirements that Safe Haven have are the same requirements that PSG have, as well as any other visitation agency that does visits with the Bureau, which is that anytime a parent shows up after 15 minutes per contract, we don't have the choice. We have to leave with the children. It is not a decision that I can make or my staff can make, but it is one that we have to, because the Bureau wants to see that we can make sure that our parents are being responsible. About a month ago, I actually met with Governor Scott Walker, and one of the things that we talked about is I began to advocate for my families and the court order requirements that they're having to deal with. It's difficult when you have families that are dealing with what we call areas of concentrated poverty. They're also dealing with structural factors as well as cultural factors, which make it difficult for them to meet their court requirements. So what is it that we can do as the community to help our families be engaged? I've been doing visits for about 4 or 5 years exclusively. And when starting out, I actually started out sacrificing time away from my own children. I work sometimes 7 days a week so that my families can see their children. And actually, I started out doing it free, as a free service, because most of my families that come through Family and Children Court can't afford the visitation fee. So I'm definitely very, very passionate about what we do. But when our families are with us, I try to make it something that is very comfortable for them. So I thank you guys for having me here.
All right, and to the general community, if you have suggestions or recommendations that you feel are really important, that the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare should know, please feel free to pick up the phone and give them a call. Contact your legislators and let them know, because, I was not aware about the 15-minute rule. But,
yes.
Now that we have that knowledge,
That's
there's something
correct.
that we can do. Can we pull together as a community to see if we can have that modified?
Extended.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. We're going to go into our next section. We're going to be talking about children that kill, and this is going to be a very serious topic, very sensitive, and definitely one that we're going to have to approach lightly, but we definitely need to, I think, have the conversation. And so we're going to be looking at conduct disorder as well as antisocial personality disorder. And so I have in the studio with me today Mr. Aaron Pressey from Sebastian Family Psychology Practice. And so we're going to be talking about this very sensitive topic. And if you'd like to join in the conversation, please feel free to call 414-444-5250. How are you doing, Mr. Pressey?
I'm well, thank you.
That's great. Kids who kill typically fall in a different type of categories according to their trait situations, their motivations. Some children kill because of accidents, such as those involving kids who find their parents' guns.
Correct.
We've seen those kind of scenarios in the news. But then you also have many who, or those types of other kills that happen within specific parameters or motives, different contexts. Most of the experts categorize those killings by kids as either inner city gang killings, or what they say, killing within a family, occult killings, pathology, school killings, killings committed during another crime, and sexual killings, hate crimes. And then you also have suicide, kids who kill themselves, So we're going to talk a little bit about children who kill and look at conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder. So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. So what is it that you do, Mr. Pressey?
I'm a psychotherapist for Sebastian Family Psychology Practice, specifically working with children and families.
Okay. So we're talking about particularly what is conduct disorder?
Conduct disorder is a condition where children break 3 of 15 criteria within a 1 month or within a 12-month period, and one of those within a 1 month period of time. You'll see behaviors such as harming animals, harming other children, breaking a lot of the societal norms of children their age, or breaking rules, defiance to authority figures, defiance to adults, destruction of property, setting fires and or stealing from stores. Early onset is before 10, and adolescent onset is 15.
So when you start talking about some of these traits or symptoms.
Correct.
Am I using the right term? Symptoms. Okay. Stealing and destruction to property, defiance to adults. How is conduct disorder different from oppositional defiant disorder?
It's a good question. Oppositional defiance disorder is more opposition to authority. It doesn't really entail the harming of something else or the lack of remorse. I think that's the thing that really makes conduct disorder stand out and brings it closer to antisocial personality disorder, which is an adult diagnosis. A lot of the same traits. The difference is that one is for children and adolescents, the other is for adults.
Okay. And so how is that different from or connected? Conduct disorder, how is it linked to, if it is, antisocial personality disorder?
Well, conduct disorder, and the belief that we have is that if you can help a child work on some of the behaviors and thinking when a child, that they will find a way to work through and develop some sense of remorse and really adhere to the societal norms and rules and not continue to harm other people or destroy property. As I stated before, conduct disorder is prior to the age of 18.
Okay.
And antisocial personality disorder happens at 18 or over.
How common is it for children to have a conduct disorder? Is this one of those popular, I hate to use the term popular, but more common diagnoses that we're seeing in children and in adolescents?
Well, I haven't seen a lot of children that have conduct disorder, so I would be afraid to put a number on it.
Okay, okay.
It's just a condition that some children have that we try to work through it. Sometimes, it's interesting because sometimes you see children doing behaviors that they've seen their parents do.
Okay.
Or behaviors that they're mimicking that their peers do. But really, if you look for the lack of remorse, it really should give you a clue that something else is going on.
A lack of remorse. Okay.
Correct.
So
or empathy.
And I guess my next question, you work with a foster care population.
I work with foster care and wraparound Milwaukee children.
Wraparound. And so a lot of children who come in are in the system's care.
Correct.
Within that population, are you seeing a lot of conduct disorder diagnoses?
I don't see a lot of it.
You don't see a lot?
I don't
Okay.
see an overabundance of it.
Are there any other co-occurring diagnoses that typically that go with conduct disorder?
No.
Not okay. Because I was reading something that was talking about ADHD. Right. You know, some of the papers, but in your opinion, no. Okay. So there's a number of things that's concerning that's happened in our community within a relatively short period of time. Go ahead.
Well, you do see impulsivity, and sometimes impulsivity is looked at as ADHD.
Okay.
But impulsivity can just be that, a child that has impulsivity.
Okay.
And doesn't necessarily have all the other symptoms of ADHD.
We're living in a time, this piece you talked about conduct disorder and an element of lack of remorse.
Correct.
The time that we're living in, is that just the culture of this generation? Because I, too, work with a lot of foster children. I work with children in my family and youth in my family. And it just seemed like that this generation is one that just seemed like there is no remorse. And let me give an example. And although this person is not a youth, the 20-year-old guy, Mr. Pettis, who allegedly broke into this lady's home who was 101 years old, right. To steal and end up raping, physically abusing and raping this very fragile, delicate lady. Right. And when I saw the videotape on the news, there was such a lack of remorse, and I don't know what that was. I'm not sure if you saw that clip, but from what I saw in the news, there was a statement that was made that said, you all are about to make me a celebrity. And so I wonder if he were to come into your office, and he's 20 years old, what would stand out for you? How would you classify?
First, I would look for a history of conduct disorder.
Okay. A history of conduct disorder.
Right. Many times that a person has antisocial personality disorder, has a history of conduct disorder.
Has a history of and that's the diagnosis that comes when they're a teenager.
Correct.
Okay.
Or a preteen.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what I would look for.
That's what you would look for. Okay. So there's this, I don't know if it's grandiose, if it was, what was it, in terms of the meaning of the posture, but what is the likelihood that there were some of these traits or symptoms in this individual's life? And again, we don't know all the details of the case. We do not know this individual personally, but just in general, are there some things do you think there's some things probably in a person like that past that would speak to conduct disorder? Or did this happen overnight?
Well,
do people arrive at that place overnight?
I've never seen anyone just arrive to a place where they seem to get pleasure out of harming other people. Usually you'll see a persistent pattern of this type of behavior. I'm sure that if you look at Mr. Pettis' past, you will see a history of that type of behavior. And it doesn't only have to be violent. Remember I said there's 15 criteria,
right?
And you have to meet 3 within a 12-month period.
Within a 12-month period.
Correct. So within a year. So he could have been stealing. He could have been damaging property. He could have been hurting animals or hurting other people without violating them to the point of a sexual assault. But sexual assault is one of the criteria for conduct disorder.
Well, let me ask you this, because there is a sense of hypersexualized behavior just in society in general, but particularly with kids who come into care, and a large percentage of them have either been sexually abused or they have perped on someone. So when we look at these, what you call these criteria, meeting 3 of these, the defiance towards adults, because someone can say, okay, that's kind of subjective. So is that consistent, constant? What does that defiance looks like? Well, if I'm a mother or a father that's listening to this show today, and you say, wow, 3 out of 15 criteria and my son could be diagnosed, well, he stole before he stole out of my purse. He stole out of my wallet, what?
I think the thing you have to look at is a persistent pattern. So we're not talking about he did it once or twice. We're saying this is a consistent pattern of stealing and lying or conning in order to gain something for their own gain.
So there's a manipulation piece here. There is a charm.
A conning piece.
A conning. So
correct.
That's conning and charm. They're not, or manipulation. They're
Same.
a little different. Okay. So when I'm looking at the Pettis case with the limited information, when I'm looking, and this is what's interesting, how I'm going to tie this into this conversation, that there was a new law that was passed back in August of 2014, where Wisconsin now has extended foster care to the age of 21. And there's a criteria around that, because I don't believe that is for any and every child or young adult who would like to stay in the system's care. But from my perspective, I've seen a lot of children, I read a lot of referrals that come, and conduct disorder is there. Whether it's appropriately diagnosed or not diagnosed, it's there on paper. Right. So if Mr. Pettis was in foster care, or, he's aged out, and now he wants to come back into foster care, we pretty much, is my understanding, will have to try to find a way to work with him if he meets a certain criteria. So I'm looking at this conduct disorder diagnosis, and, some of these traits and some of these behaviors, sexualized behavior, or let's say stealing, there's some conning going on, breaking into property, with all this that's going on, how do we deal with servicing our clients in care who present with some of these traits and issues and carry these diagnoses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really believe in therapy. Granted, I'm a psychotherapist, but I really believe in therapy. I believe when people have an opportunity to talk out what's going on with them, and make some decisions about some of the choices that they're making, that some special things happen.
Okay. We have a caller on the line. Caller? Good afternoon, caller.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Thank you. I don't want to wear my welcome, but...
Christopher?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, sir?
All right. Thank you for taking my call once again.
Anytime.
Listening to the psychotherapist, what I wanted people to keep in mind is that, like, when it comes to psychology and things like psychotherapy and all of those things, these supposed disciplines are not recognized as actual or literal sciences. These are people who are, for the most part, glorified counselors who have the ability to prescribe barbiturates and psychotropes and designate and classify someone as mentally retarded or mentally impaired to whatever degree. And what this has become for black people, particularly, is one of the other tentacles, which is a part of that octopus, which the head of white supremacy is based upon. This has become a part of the means to legitimize the institutionalization of our young people, the classification overall of people who are deemed as, what do they call that, emotionally disturbed or special ed, when it is the actual system itself that has failed the very people that they think that they are serving. So this man, psychotherapist, Mr. Man, with all due respect to you, the key word to his title is psych. And I know we used to play a game when we were young where we played tricks on each other and we would say psych one to the other. This is a game of trickery and foolery, and it is a part of our own dismantling of our own people, because we think that because these people have studied these books and they've come up with these glorious words to classify people as this or that legitimizes the extermination or disenfranchisement of them. And that is what this man represents. He is another agent of the state that is to the detriment of our people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christopher. But Christopher, are you still there? Okay, we've lost Christopher, because the question I was going to ask Christopher is whether or not he thinks that in the African American community there is a need for mental health services. Now, and so we didn't get a chance to pose that to him. But Mr. Presley, would you like to respond to Christopher's?
Well, I don't have a whole lot to say to Christopher. I mean, he's entitled to his opinion.
Right.
But I know that counseling, therapy, whatever term you want to use, helps people. I don't know what he means by a glorified counselor. And
I want to clarify, you don't prescribe medication. You're not a psychiatrist.
Correct.
You do talk therapy.
I do psychotherapy.
Psychotherapy, talk therapy. Okay, yes. And so my question for you, I'm going back to some of the things that these children are presenting with that we work with in care, with conduct disorder, if a parent is seeing some of these behaviors. How do we address it? You know, you mentioned talk therapy.
Correct.
But I guess the other concern that I have, or what I would like to address or talk about, is that when I look at a long history of some cases that took place, if you go back to 2002, there was a young man that was killed by at least 16 young boys. His name was Charles Young Jr. Mm-hmm. And folk who are listening to this program will remember that. Then we'll have to fast forward to, I believe it was 2009, there was the 13-year-old young lady. And going back to Charles Young Jr., you had children as young as 10 years of age. Correct. Who participated in that killing, that brutal beating, and end up being murder. And then we have Labrina T. Brown from 2009 October, who had stabbed her grandmother's husband in the neck, which the media kind of labeled or titled it over spoiled milk. You know, so not spoiled, but spilled milk. So when you look at these behaviors, there's so much anger and this culture of lack of remorse that we're seeing children who don't show any remorse for stealing, for breaking in, for raping, for how do we deal with that? You know, that's what my concern is. And true, a lot of these children that I've talked about, they're in the system's care. And if a child comes into the system care at the age of 2, and they may have been exposed to some compromised situation, poverty-related situations, or what have you, but if they've been in the system's care for 10, 12, 13 years and they age out of the system, then they break in someone's home and they rape that person, or how much of that is our responsibility? What do we need to do? And that's why I bring you on the show to kind of talk about this conduct disorder and what we can do to successfully parent and meet the needs of the children that we're responsible for.
That's a good question. You know, I think a couple of things we have to do is we need to really be cognizant of the values that we're portraying and we're demonstrating in front of our children. Mm-hmm. Are we saying one thing and doing another? If we are, then what we're saying, the children aren't listening to, and they're looking at what we're doing.
Gotcha.
Also, we have to be aware. We really have to be aware of the things we see. A lot of times people, especially in our community, in the black community, are very afraid or suspicious about professionals, and I can understand that as an African American man. However, there is a great need for mental health counseling and mental health care in the black community. I think the faster we can get someone involved in that, the better chance they have. Early intervention, the better chance they have of being able to work through these issues in their lives, be healthy and contributing back to society.
Okay, we have a caller on the phone. We actually have a couple calls. Caller?
Yes, sir. This is Christopher again. You
We got this.
For me?
We got disconnected. I wanted to know, do you think there is a need for mental health service, that African Americans need mental health services?
My response to that would be certainly there is a need, but my question that would be attached to that is, why is there a need? See, what I think and what I'm sure that if you are sincerely speaking to the causation as to why black people are acting the way that they are acting, you have to go to the very reason as to why the behavior exists.
The cause. Okay,
The
right.
cause.
You got to get to the root. You got to get to the root.
So, and may I say this in closing? The psychological or institution of psychotherapy or psychiatry, the Western version, it is not established or it was not created to benefit black people or black children. Okay. It is not going to help get them out of the mental crisis that they are in, because it was made to retard them in the very first place.
Okay, so do you have a solution? What's the solution, Christopher? What's the
Our solution overall is that we have to dismiss, dissociate, disengage what we have been taught regarding Western culture.
All right.
In its entirety.
All right. Thanks. We got to take this next call. Thank you, Christopher. Have a great day. Caller, you on air? Okay, so I think the caller hung up. But what we're going to do, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about, we talked about conduct disorder. I want to kind of look at what can parents do if they're concerned about their children having conduct disorder, what assessment and treatment looks like. You know, we talk about talk therapy, and so we'll tackle those issues when we come back. The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ngera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children. You're listening to Jermaine. This is Fresh Start Today. And, I was thinking, about Mr. Christopher's comments, and there was a lot of good things he said. Historically, we have been exposed to a lot of trauma, and there is some trauma related to our relationship with government systems. I mean, all that's documented, and not just African Americans, but Native Americans, any kind of body that was not a European American. We understand it, and even some European Americans have had those experiences. And these traumas, these unresolved historical traumas, have impacted our lives today. But I'm thinking that somebody listening to the program will probably say, well, you know what? Yes, slavery did happen. The no man in the house rule did happen. Public policy that impacted the quality of life of African Americans. But is that to say that there is not an issue in our community that's impacting our quality of parent? Because, again, in child welfare, I know in 2002, Department of Children and Families released a report. It's called their annual report. And according to that report, there was, 68% of the families that were served by our local bureau were black families. That's their data. Now, I'm smart enough, or I think I'm smart enough to know that not all those folks that were serviced by the bureau were wrong or need to be in the system's care. Some decisions probably were made that were not the best decisions. You have a lot of factors. But there is a certain percentage of those children who came into care because we neglected them, because we did drugs with them, because we sold our children for drugs, because we abused our children, we sexually abused our children. And so how do we deal with that? Because that speaks to something that, yes, there is some mental health issues, and how are we going to band together as a community to address our mental health issues so that our children won't be impacted in a negative way? And so I guess that's the question I would ask the community. What can we do? I mean, and what is the role? Is there any value to psychotherapy or counseling? What do those supports need to look like so we as a community can get to a healthier place, and hopefully then there won't be any need for a child welfare system, government system, and the community, as we know from African tradition, will then be the child welfare body. So it'll be interesting to hear some people talk about that. So going back to this topic, an antisocial personality disorder, what are some of those traits again?
Well, the traits of some of the traits of antisocial behavior are the same as conduct disorder. The biggest difference is the person is over the age of 18.
Yep, conduct out of age 18, and so. So anti-personality disorder, what is the likelihood again for that to be connected to?
Well, I don't want to really
conduct, or that possibly that conduct, is it likely that if you have...
Usually when a person has antisocial personality disorder, they also had conduct disorder.
They usually had conduct.
Many times I know that children aren't seen for that, and they're just said that need a good whipping, or their parents didn't discipline them enough, and that many times is not true.
So how do we address conduct when there's a legitimate diagnosis? There are these traits, and they're at a frequency that raises some concerns with a parent. What are some of the things, whether you're talking about a foster parent, or you're talking about a birth parent, an adoptive parent, a grandparent, you have this child who's less than 18 years of age, and they have some of these behaviors that are concerning. What are some of the things that they can do to manage the behavior, or can we use the term cure the behavior? Can conduct order be cured?
It can be changed.
Okay.
They need to get to a professional, and they need to get some consultation from the professional, and the child needs to get some treatment.
Okay.
That is the best solution for helping a child work through conduct disorder that I know. Okay. Now, here's another part. The child has to want to make changes, because as we all know, each individual makes their own choices of what they do. And if a child doesn't want to change their behaviors, those behaviors will not change.
Okay. So, this is interesting, just diagnosis, because I know almost every kid that comes into the system care, they have a diagnosis of something. And just being in care is traumatic. And so I'm hoping that through this program and through these conversations and presentations that we as a community can begin to have an honest dialogue about what our issues are, because when we can have this conversation, whether it's on air or whether it's at someone's kitchen table or at a community center, when we can begin to start having a conversation, honest conversation about what's going on in our community, and coming up with solutions, I think it gives... It minimizes the chances that there has to be an intervention by government system, because we know that foster care is not the best system to raise any children in. And we've seen this theme or this issue repeated over and over again, not just locally, but nationally. And so hopefully we can begin to deal with some of the mental illnesses and challenges that we face as a community, whether it's co-sleeping, whether it is neglectful behavior that we have exhibited, that we can learn how to work with one another so that we just don't come to the attention of child welfare. But I will like to say, that I've seen it in my own family, I've seen it in my friends' family, that there are just some folk who just lack the ability for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of historical trauma or some unresolved issues in their lives where they have not been able to successfully, parent children. And so I think what we're seeing when we look at these stories in the news, and again, I don't know what Mr. Pettis' issues were, what his profile is, but it's concerning. And it raises the question for me, as a community, within our community, what is going on? What do we need to do? And could we have saved Mr. Pettis? And not saying that nobody reached out to him, but how many Mr. Pettises are walking around in our community right now? How many of our 101-year-old grandmothers and great-grandmothers are at risk? Those are things that we have to begin to have that dialogue. It's traumatizing to a community. And let me say, to see young men incarcerated, to see the volume of children who are coming into the care that are African American, that are Latino, that are Caucasian, just the number of folk that are coming into the community, into the child welfare system, that's traumatizing. That leaves a void in our community. So I definitely think there is some work that need to be done. But going back to conduct disorder, do we think that our children are out of control? Are our children out of control when we're, and great. Granted, the media does not always have a positive portrayal. They not always positively portray African American boys, men, the parent, the mother. We've never seen that in the media. No. But when we have a closed conversation, intimate conversation, can we honestly sit here and say that we don't have an issue here?
Yeah, and a lot of the criminality you're seeing is happening on black or Latino on Latino. You're seeing a lot of the anger being spilled out within the community. I just like to say we look for things, we talk about things that don't work. We really need to have a dialogue about what things do work. Mm-hmm. I believe that a professional intervention at an early age gives a person the best chance of being able to change. If you get a child young that's not really set in their ways, if we can find a way for the parents to consistently show a supportive and positive role modeling, mm-hmm. I think that all of those factors play a big part in our children having a chance. I've treated children that have come from affluent families where the parents are very pro-social. Mm-hmm. And they're not African American, where the children end up displaying some of the traits of conduct disorder. So when I think of a disorder, I don't think of a particular race. I look at the child that needs help and find out what I can do to help that child. A part of our behaviors are genetic. Okay. And so some of the traits could come from your genetic line. I don't know if that's so important as what can we do to help it. So it's here. So what can we do to make it better?
So that's what, nature versus nurture, or environmental, biological, genetic factors that...
Correct. All of these are factors.
All these are factors.
All of these are contributing factors. I don't think there's one factor. They're all contributing factors.
So let's look at it from an environmental standpoint. Children who grow up in very abusive, chaotic home environment, what are the chances that those children will exhibit those behaviors or model those behaviors in the classroom setting, in the community setting? What are those chances?
They're higher than a child who grows up in a setting where there's a lot of pro-social role modeling, where the parents quickly address the behaviors in a nonviolent way.
Okay, so I'm just kind of looking at, just trying to map that out in my head. But and I agree with you. I think that home environment is so foundational, so critical, and somehow we have to get back to and having a healthier home environment. I understand there's going to be some variation based on people's values or whatever, but never should sexually abuse of your child be acceptable by anybody's standard. I don't know if that's subjective right there, Right. And when we get to a point where young children being left alone to attend to themselves, and that's not healthy. That's not good. When we talk about drug abuse, and there's a large percentage of kids who come into care who parents are using drugs rather frequently, and it's impacting their ability to manage and function well and respond to the needs of their child. That is a concern. That is an issue. And so I think we really have to work to do something, because my goal is to do whatever we need to do to minimize the need for foster care services overall. And it's not a good business. And but on both sides, professional and personal, there's a lot that's going on with our community, with our children, and we're going to have some courageous conversations and bring folk from from a variety of disciplines to the table, and not saying that professionals that we have the answer that we have to cure, because we don't, but everyday people have to be a part of this conversation, and we're going to have to look at what our value systems look like. Corporate value systems of the African American community. What are we tolerating? What are things are we encouraging by our behaviors? Because we can say one thing and do something else, and it will lose its value. So I'm hoping that we can do whatever we need to do so that we don't have young men like Mr. Pettis that's been incarcerated because we as a community didn't respond to his needs, that we don't have any more Labrina Browns who lose a large percentage or portion of their lives incarcerated because of whatever trauma they were exposed to in their early life. We can go down that list and down that list. And I'm certain that there are folk who listen to this program who, if they just step back and they think about it, wow, in my family, my cousin, my brother, my uncle, my aunt, that there's some issues here, and we can't get help, and we can't help. I believe we got to help ourselves. We can't get to a healthier, better place if we don't address whatever it is that we have going on head on. So we have to take a break, and then we're going to be closing out this segment, because I do still want to know, why is it that children kill and the type of killings that we're seeing that's going on. So we're going to take a break.
The East African tradition of the Maasai tribe is to greet one another with the words Kasirian Ngera, which is Swahili for, so how are the children? In that community, the well-being of their children is the highest priority. If you are interested in participating in thought-provoking conversations about the well-being of children and families, please tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. to Fresh Start Today on 860 AM WNOV. Together, we can save our children.
You're listening to Fresh Start Today. This is Jermaine Reed, your host, and in the studio I have Mr. Aaron Pressey, who is a psychotherapist. My tongue is tied. Psychotherapist with Sebastian Family Psychology Practice, and we're talking about conduct disorder and anti-social personality disorder, and what you've talked about in the very first segment of this. This part two is that in general, conduct disorder is a persistent pattern of behaviors during childhood and adolescence that includes violating social rules, which defines aggression, property damage, lies, stealing, and that there are like 15 different traits and criteria. The criteria is 15 different traits, and that the individual has to exhibit 3 out of the 15 in 12 months period. Okay, so
with
that's
one being presented within at least the last month.
And with one of those traits being exhibited within the last. Okay, got it. So now we talk about conduct disorder, and we're talking about a lot of children who kill are diagnosed with conduct disorder. There was a pattern, or that there are children who kill and they have diagnosed. And I look at some of these cases I've talked about. There is some diagnosed where they had conduct disorder. Right. So and obviously somebody saw this, but maybe perhaps they didn't pick up on it. Lil Billy was running away and breaking into people's cars, into their homes, and this was repeated over very frequently. Right. Lil Billy sexually assaulting his younger sister, and cousin, and so we have all these pieces, and so then now somebody come in and say, okay, here's my son, I need you to do an evaluation, tell me what's going on, and because he's exhibited these 3 traits out of 15, one of those within the last 30 days is determined that Lil Billy has has conduct disorder.
Right.
Do I got okay?
But yeah, you're
There's a crash
exactly
course?
right.
Okay.
But usually you won't just see 3 specific ones.
Okay.
You'll see people cycle through because they're all kind of tied together.
Okay.
So you'll see, except for the sexual behaviors, but the societal norm violation is pretty connected together. So you'll see kids run away from home. You'll see them stay out after curfew, even though they know the parents don't want them to do that. You'll see constant violation of parental rules. You'll see maybe harming of the dog. The dog's not going to bite them back, so they'll do something to the dog that they wouldn't do to the dog if they knew the dog would turn and bite them.
Okay.
Those type of behaviors. Killing of smaller animals.
Right, because when we start looking at serial killers, that's one of the classic, what you call it, traits, symptoms, killing animals, in your childhood. And so, I've seen a lot of referrals that come through the system where children have thrown animals, broke their neck, and throw them over the porch, put them in microwaves. We've seen all of those things, So the question that I had, that I'm building this conversation on, and I'm talking about it because foster parents receive a lot of kids or care for a lot of kids who are diagnosed with CD, conduct disorder.
Correct.
What causes children to kill? What are some of the things that lend to that?
Well, there's a big thing of reputation.
Reputation.
When you violate a child's reputation, sometimes that child believes that if they don't stand up to you, then they become a target for other of their peers in their community. Sometimes children haven't been role modeled good ways to display.
Situations that might be what? Parents who are in gangs, parents who are selling or trafficking drugs.
Correct.
So role model.
Or very violent beatings.
Very violent beatings.
Very violent beatings
violence,
have been
abuse.
Linked to. And one of the reasons I believe the Bureau removes children who are being abused like that leads to children finding out that or believing that that's how they display their anger or how they display their dislike of something.
Okay. And so you said, what about their conscience? Someone question that, will question some of these acts committed by individuals, so, that person had no conscience. Is that a
leads
possibility?
More towards the conduct disorder.
Okay.
Lack of remorse, lack of empathy.
Gotcha.
Empathy being not able to put yourself in the position of others.
Okay. So what about anger? Because I hear it's just a violent, angry society that we're living in. Adults, older people, everybody seems to be angry. So children, young people, as young as 4 and 5 going to school, just angry.
Well, that could lead to, it could come from a number of things. I always go back to family, but you can't forget about genetics as well.
Okay.
And so if your child seems that they're angrier than normal or not really so angry but unable to de-escalate themselves within a reasonable amount of time, or their anger escalates to a place where they're harming other people or themselves, I would get that person to a doctor.
Okay.
And the doctor then would decide if they needed to speak to a therapist or not.
Okay. When I look at some of the instances, if what does accountability, parental accountability, how do we factor that in? Because let me give an example. If little Johnny is going to school and he's just tearing up the whole classroom, he's all in the hallway, he's just cussing everybody out, and little Johnny knows nothing but 8 years old. It's my belief, and this is just me talking, this is my belief that maybe there's an issue here with holding kids. How do we hold kids accountable for their behavior, whether they are 8 or they're 15? How do we determine if we see all these behaviors? Where does accountability?
Well, accountability is used. A parent's job is to teach. Our job is to teach our children how to be good pro-social members of society. I would really suggest people go to parenting classes.
Okay.
I know I'm stepping on a lot of toes now.
Okay.
But people have to learn how to be parents, and we've all been parented, and we all could really get some help in teaching our children how to be good, productive members of society.
Do you think that the way we parent today is different than how, as a community, we parented 30 years ago?
Of course,
40 years ago?
Of course I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. When a person hurts a child through a spanking or beating, that child's removed, and that parent, I've worked with a lot of parents, children that the parent has been put in prison. I think that that's real different, and I think one of the things that parents do is they become afraid, and they feel like their power has been taken away, and so some do very little and blame the system rather than coming to an agency like Sebastian Family Psychology Practice, to name one, that has parenting being taught, or coming in and speaking with a therapist or a psychologist that could teach them parenting skills. We found that these skills work. It doesn't matter what race the person's in. We've all been in America for several hundred years, and so we're just as westernized as the people who've come from other places and come here. I think we need to stop focusing on that and start focusing on how to help our children.
Now, some folk would just say, this kid don't have conduct disorder, he just bad.
Right.
You don't have ADHD, he just bad.
Exactly.
He just needs his behind whooped.
Correct.
Do you think, and I hope you feel comfortable because with answering this, if not, then it's okay. Do you think, one, that there is a general value, or there's a value that's held in general society, that in African American communities, that physical disciplining of children is a value, and that it is a cure for ADHD, conduct disorder, learning disability, bipolar? I mean, do you think that people hold that value?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
It's been mentioned to me several times by several professionals in other fields that I work with.
And so, given that that is a value, do you think that it was helpful for the government to have laws for people to not to physically discipline their children?
Well, evidence shows that children who are physically disciplined grow up and resent and have a lot of rebellion for authority. That is a statistical fact.
What about the mother who said, you know what, I physically disciplined my kids, and my kid now has graduated from Harvard. My kid is whatever, successful, and and I guess the question becomes, because I think what the law actually says in Chapter 48, that you, as biological parents, that you cannot physically discipline to the point where you abuse excessive force.
Correct.
And so there is this concept, idea that birth families cannot physically discipline their
That's not
children,
true.
and that's not true.
Correct.
Is that you just cannot physically discipline where you leave marks and bruises,
Or
or
you
you
harm
use
to hurt
excess,
the
or
child.
you harm. Your tendency to harm.
Correct.
Okay, so now we've got Chapter 48 clear, but in the foster care context, that's not something that is permissible.
No.
Okay, period. So how do we bring balance there? Is physical discipline an effective means to address mental health issues?
It's not.
I agree with you. Okay, well, you know what? It's been great. And, we'd look to have you back on the show at some point, Mr. Presley. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, and your service that you provide your community is very valuable. I'm going to end this segment with a couple announcements. Everybody know that November is National Adoption Month. And it's also National Diabetes Month as well. So, juvenile diabetes is an issue in our community, as well as diabetes. And people should check with their doctors. And parents, make sure that if your children have insulin, that you're knowledgeable about how to administer that insulin, check their glucose. Because we see a number of kids who come into care because the parents are not administering their medication or monitoring that whole issue, correctly, and compromising the health of the child. We also know that the Foster Care and Adoption Resource Center will be providing free training for licensing and child welfare staff on Friday, December the 5th, 2014. So you can give them a call, because I'm not quite sure exactly what the topic is, but they're going to be, they're going to be talking about building code standards pertaining to the requirements of the administrative code. And so that's great. And then we also, for those who are listening and you're part of the foster care community, there's a collaborative training on December the 6th. It's titled Happy Holidays, Watching for Trauma Triggers for Kids Who Are in Foster Care. So you can contact the UWM School of Continuing Education and get more information about that if you like. And it's been great. Hopefully we'll be back next week, and everyone have a safe and blessed holiday.
Always seems to know the way.